much, Alba. Thank you everybody for letting me come and talk to you today. I'm so excited to be here. Yesterday I was at the Rotary Club in Los Altos, and a couple of weeks ago the Rotary Club in Menlo Park, so I feel like I'm almost a member. I get to eat for free, and I haven't paid my membership dues yet, but it's a wonderful club. I know that because my dad was a Rotarian, so I'm really happy to be honoring him today by doing this. Let me just get my little clicker ready here. So I'm going to be spending some time talking to you today about some of the things that I've learned after working with over 1,300 women in the field of domestic violence. We like to think it doesn't happen in the nicer parts of town, but the truth is we're just better at hiding it. And the gentlemen in the audience, I don't want you to feel like this is going to be a male bashing event. There are a lot of wonderful men in the world, and I have a lot of wonderful men in my life, my dad, my grandpa, all the men on my board, like male volunteers. So power and control can happen in any relationship, in any gender, any race, any religion. I don't want you to think that males have cornered the market on it. It can go both ways. But just because most victims of domestic violence are female, I'll be talking about victims as she and perpetrators as he. But please know that I know it's very difficult when men are in that situation as well. And thank you all so much for coming out today to hear me. And I promise it's not gonna be a man bashing event. So what we do is we run a helpline, we run a support group, we do court, police station, and attorney accompaniments. We do ongoing safety planning for survivors for as long as they need it, not on just issues like physical and sexual violence, but also different more subtle forms of abuse like technological, emotional, financial. These are the types of abuse perpetrated often very successfully by people with a lot of knowledge and expertise and credibility in the community. I also do a lot of trainings for professionals, trainings for the Santa Clara County Bar Association, for Superior Court, for Kaiser, Google, Oracle. I do trainings for lots of providers in lots of different areas to help them become more trauma-informed dealing with this population. And I serve on the Domestic Violence Death Review team, and that's where the ultimate act of domestic violence gets committed. So we try to learn from that in order to help people be safer in the future. These are just some examples of some of the media work that I've done to do public outreach to raise awareness about this issue. It was a great year last year for doing that. I was on the Megyn Kelly Today Show, I was in the Good Morning America, and the New York Times, and NBC just called me. They want me to participate in a video series on the abuse of technology in domestic violence relationships. Silicon Valley is the land of technology, and companies are thinking about how do we build better products to serve more people and make more money. They are not thinking about how those products can be abused by people who abuse power and control. So I'm really thrilled to know that NBC wants to do a series on this. As Alba mentioned, I'm a teacher by training and a domestic violence advocate. I'm going to be talking about just a small subset of abuser today. The affluent abuser, most people with power and money and wealth, I like to think are good people. I've met many, many good people who are successful in the world. They're adult, they're male, they're professional, they're successful, they're good, they're kind, they're good husbands, good dads. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the ones that lie at the far end of the bell curve. The ones that look like you and me, that join the Rotary Club, that coach their son's soccer team, that give to worthy causes, and have another very different persona revealed behind closed doors. That's the type of person I'm talking about today. I'll tell you a couple of stories because I'm Irish and I can't help it, but I'm going to tweak the details to protect the innocent and the guilty. And the stories I'm going to share with you are just that, they're stories. They may sound anecdotal to you because they are. We don't have a lot of data on this population. Why not? Because we think it doesn't happen here. And because where are the places that people go when they are experiencing domestic violence? They go to the police station, they go to the hospital, they go to domestic violence agencies, the very places that women in middle to upper income areas tend not to reach out to for help. They are silent. So we have a skewed perception of how prevalent the problem is. the Rotary Club in Menlo Park, where I was at a couple of weeks ago, a gentleman in the audience later said, you know, I think it might be even more prevalent in this demographic because we are so adept at hiding it and have so many more tools at our disposal to exercise that power and control. But look at the planet. The World Health Organization did a study. 1 in 3 women will be raped or beaten during her lifetime. 1 in 3. Global epidemic. And so what is domestic violence? It's the abuse of power to control somebody else. Through, yes, physical and sexual means, but more than that. It includes any of these behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame. I don't have to touch you to terrorize you. I don't have to punch you to control you. And think for a moment, if a woman is being emotionally beaten down day after day, how can she pick up the phone and call 911 and say, help, my husband is killing my soul? You need blood and broken bones to get legal attention often. What's it all about? Alfie, loved the music earlier. It's all about power and control. Intimidation, verbal attacks, isolating her from her family and friends, minimizing, denying, blaming. I never said that. I never criticized your cooking in front of our guests the other night. I would never do that. Or can't you take a joke? I was only kidding. You're way too sensitive. Or I never pushed you. You tripped. Ways to get inside her head to make her doubt her own perception of reality. Turning the children against her. Turning them into little tyrants or little spies. Undermining her relationship with them, undermining her authority with them. She tells them if they don't do their homework, they can't watch TV that night. Later she comes into their room and finds them watching TV with Dad. What does that tell the children about her authority? Putting her on an allowance. Punishing her for overspending. In his view, overspending. Threatening her. Pressuring her to quit her job, to get a job. And all the while, she lives in secrecy and silence and isolation, too ashamed to reach out for help. There's such shame attached to this issue in our demographic because it's not supposed to happen here. It's like, remember back in the old days, in the 1950s and 60s, you wouldn't talk about Uncle Ed being an alcoholic. But now we treat it like a disease and you go and get help for it. Well, I think that's where we are with domestic violence in middle to upper income areas now. It's society's dirty little secret, and we don't want to talk about it. But if we don't talk about it, we don't do anything about it. And the women continue to suffer in silence. And it's not just the women that are suffering. I'll tell you, it's the children too. And then they grow up and become the next generation of victims of domestic violence or perpetrators of domestic violence. And some small subset of them will go on and learn from the negative example that they were exposed to at home and say, Dad didn't treat Mom with respect. Dad was cruel to me. I'm going to learn from that and be a better dad, a better husband myself. It's wonderful when they reach that conclusion, but that doesn't always happen. It's a crossroads. And you talk to any psychologist, I will challenge you to find a psychologist who can explain what makes a child choose one road rather than another. This problem affects every person in this room, because if we think 1 in 3 women on the planet will be raped or beaten during her lifetime, that could be your daughter, that could be your sister, that could be you. And what happens living with that kind of domestic terrorism over time? The power and control that she had over her own life slips away. And what's left is a woman living in a home that used to be a sanctuary and now is turned into a cage, a prison, something she needs to escape from. The man that promised to love and respect and care for her has now become her intimate enemy that she must protect herself from, living under her own roof. And you don't just leave an abuser, you escape. And you have to plan that very carefully because there's so much at stake. Her children, her career, her home, her reputation, her source of income, her life. Because most domestic violence incidents happen after a woman leaves a relationship. That's when they end up dead, when they try to leave. Why? Because he's losing control. And many abusers will do whatever it takes to get that control back. in our part of town. Or if it does, well, she should have the money to look after herself, right? She's got resources. Wrong, not always. Often he has taken control of all the financial resources. And you never guess, because she comes up to school in her Mercedes and she drops the kids off and she's nicely dressed and well-spoken and everything's all fine. Has anybody here seen Big Little Lies? You get a chance to watch that or read the book? Yeah, like the successful lawyer, the character played by Nicole Kidman, but hiding a very dark secret. What is the culture of affluence all about? Isn't it all about, okay, your kids are going to go to a good school, they're going to get good grades, they're going to pick up an instrument or a sport, and excel at that. They're going to go off to school, they're going to do well there, they're going to meet a partner from a similar demographic, they're going to get married and settle down in a nice home in a nice neighborhood, and they're going to keep climbing that ladder of success. What part of domestic violence fits any of that picture? Well, we all recognize, who's the fellow on your left? Everybody recognize him? OJ. The fellow on your right, center, front and center, sits with his wife and his family of 8. Dr. Martin McNeil. Remember that face? I'll talk about him in a minute. Anybody can be a victim. Anybody can be a perpetrator. Here's a list, some samples of the ladies, of the professions of the ladies I work with. Engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers, psychologists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, religious leaders, stay-at-home parents, the ladies I work with. And some gentlemen, I get about 1 a year I work with. Their partners, what are their professions? Their abusive partners' professions. Engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers, psychologists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, religious leaders, stay-at-home parents. See some similarities? Anybody can be a perpetrator. Anybody can be a victim. And in ways, it's like the most egregious form of abuse if you're a doctor, if you're a healer, and a perpetrator. If you're a therapist, someone who's supposed to be helping somebody emotionally feel better about themselves and the world around them, and you use the knowledge that you've acquired to get inside somebody's head and manipulate them to make them think they're going crazy, to make them think they're useless and not capable of doing anything. Going back to what's our idea of what an abuser is. What does he look like? If we look at the person in the middle, isn't that the typical image we have? It's like Joe Blow coming home from the factory, he's had one too many beers and he whacks the wife around. And just as another hint, what's he wearing? White beater, thank you, yeah. Now look at everybody around him. Look at all the individuals around Joe Blow from the beer factory. Every single one of those has been found to have committed domestic violence. Some, the ultimate act. Yes, you see OJ down the bottom left. But to the right of him, you see George Hughley V. Anytime you've got a Roman numeral after your name, you know there's money somewhere. We'll talk about him and his girlfriend in a moment. Oh, you see that fellow on the right, far right? Recognize him? Yeah. Well, oh, sorry, down. If you go right down to the bottom row and to the right, far end. Weinstein, yes. And Scott Peterson, yes. And just above Harvey Weinstein on the right, that's Dr. Martin McNeil. Look at that nice bow tie. And, oh, sorry folks, but in the bottom left, the Rotary Club. My dad was a Rotarian. But just because you belong to the Rotary Club doesn't mean that you are a pure spirit. Because people are so capable of presenting one image in public and another behind closed doors. And I've talked to forensic psychologists who have said you cannot tell a seasoned liar. Even forensic psychologists cannot tell a seasoned liar. They are so good at camouflage, at presenting themselves like the average citizen. So the power and control dynamics are the same. It doesn't matter what demographic you come from. It's power and control. But just the more money, the more power, the more influence you have, the better able you are to wield that power and control. The more tools you've got at your disposal. And the easier it is for you to make it harder for her to leave safely, to keep custody of the children, or live anything close to what her previous standard of living was like. Anything close to his. So if you can take a look at these characteristics and start to think in your mind, can you put your therapist hat on for just a moment and go through this list with me and see what diagnostic label would come to mind after looking at all these characteristics? I'm not a therapist, but when I do my trainings for therapists, I ask them to do the same thing. And for a moment, just play along with me and see what you would call this type of person. Highly educated, advanced professional career, positive public image, they look good on paper, they present well in public, often involved in volunteer work, philanthropic work. Now, here we get into the meat. Charming, calculating, manipulative, come from any race. They tend to define their children in terms of their accomplishments, their GPA. Here's what motivates them: sex, money, winning, revenge, power, and control. Grand sense of themselves. They got to be the center of attention. It's all about them. And very good at convincing other people that their partner is crazy or she's the abuser. You've got to look at the history, the context, other evidence to find the truth. And let's keep going. Here's the kicker, right here. They tend to lack empathy. They tend to lack remorse. They tend to lack self-reflection. They tend to lack conscience, any kind of moral compass. And here, they often almost seem to enjoy causing pain to the very people they should be protecting the most. They lie easily. They lie often. They lie convincingly. They lie often, even when they don't need to. It's like they just want to keep in practice. They'll put little bits of truth in with the lies to make the lies look more credible. They blame their partners for everything. They lack self-reflection. They will never take responsibility for any harm they've done. They have to be right. They are always right. Even when they're wrong, they've got to be right. They would be the last people on earth to label themselves an abuser. They minimize any damage that they've done, and they're very good at playing the victim. Very good at shaming others, mocking them, making fun of them, humiliating them. But God forbid you should do that to them. You could be taking your life in your hands. They tend to view relationships in terms of war, business, chess, war. I can't tell you the number of times when ladies have said that their husbands have said, "This is war, I will destroy you." Chess, very good at thinking several moves ahead. Business, relationships as business transactions. What's my return on investment here? What have you done for me lately? So what, you've got cancer and going to chemo. Get the dinner on the table on time. Get the kids off to school. It's a very cold way of looking at relationships. Now take all those characteristics that I've talked about, all those behaviors. Now what diagnostic label comes to mind?
Sociopath.
Sociopath, narcissist. Now please don't anybody say a name that rhymes with lump. Because I get that every talk. Okay. Thank you very much, you got it, you nailed it. So let's look at this character here as an example of somebody in Silicon Valley, very successful entrepreneur. Durgash Shalal, G for short, grew up in San Jose, victim of hate crimes. Went on to become very successful. Well, he was a high school dropout first, and like many high school dropouts in Silicon Valley, went on to create a very successful company, sold for $350 million to Yahoo, and then went on to create a nonprofit to fight hate crimes. He donated $35,000 to a shelter for women fleeing human trafficking and domestic violence. He was on the Charlie Rose show before Charlie Rose's fall from grace. There he is on Oprah, and Oprah is singing his praises, saying, "And he's single, girls. Are you waiting for the other shoe to drop?" Domestic violence conviction. Twice. Took a long time to bring him to justice, but they did finally. Such a positive public image he had. Okay, an example of emotional abuse in the professional community. Physician. One of my ladies was asked by her attorney, "Why don't you let me fight harder to get a fairer settlement for you? I could get so much more for you than you're letting me go after." She was still living with her husband through the course of the divorce. And you know why? Because he had taken total control of finances. She wouldn't have a roof over her head if she left. She said to her attorney, to explain why she didn't let him fight harder to get a fairer settlement. You know what he told me the other night over dinner? He said, "Do you know there's more than 40 ways to kill a woman and make it look like she died from natural causes?" Now, he didn't say, I'm going to run you over this afternoon with a truck, right? She's not going to pick up her phone and say, help, my husband is, murdering me. No. But she got the message loud and clear and backed off in terms of what she asked for. That was an anecdote. That was a story. Remember Dr. Martin McNeil? This one made the news in Utah. Physician, lawyer, bishop in his local church, convicted of pumping his wife full of drugs designed to make it look like she died from natural causes. He had bragged about that to a former mistress, being able to do that. And then here's what his own daughter says afterwards, after he was convicted. I'm just so glad he can't hurt anyone else. Remember Dr. Martin McNeil? Before, after. Committed suicide in prison. What does a domestic violence victim look like? Just like you and me, like a regular person. You'd never guess. Bottom right-hand corner, Yardley Love, champion lacrosse player, murdered by her college boyfriend. Leslie Morgan Steiner above that, on the right, wrote the book Crazy Love, Harvard grad, best-selling author, domestic violence survivor. Why do they stay then? If it's so bad, why do they stay? Many times, it's shame. They don't want anybody to know that they're living this quiet life of horror, terror, fear. They think that they can fix it. They fix so many other things in their life. They're smart, they're professional, they're accomplished, they figured out all these other problems. They're going to figure this one out as well. What they don't realize is some powers are beyond one's ability to fix. Some things are beyond your ability, your power to fix. Because she didn't cause it, she can't change it, she can't fix it. All she can do is save herself. Fear of what will happen if she goes. As we said, the most dangerous time is after she leaves. The more money that was involved, the greater her fear that she would die either at his hands directly or through a third party. Los Gatos, a few years ago, wealthy developer, Ed Dow. There was a restraining order in place. He would beat his wife for buying a new dress, putting highlights in her hair. She ended up getting a restraining order against him because she was afraid he was going to do something to her or their children. She got the restraining order. He still ended up doing something to her child. He killed himself and their child. Here, Silicon Valley again, finance manager, Juliana here, killed by her husband a couple of years ago, Christmas Eve. Here, Silicon Valley, Kaiser employees, ultimate victims of domestic violence. The abuse of technology, just a little taste. Check my time, all right. One of my ladies, pursued by a drone. We don't have sufficient FDA regulations around these devices yet. Bottom left here, this GPS system. So computers are kind of like computers on wheels now. Cars are like computers on wheels now. So we had a therapist who was fleeing her husband from Southern California. She's up driving around the Bay Area, and she inputs a voice-activated command to a location that she wants to go to in the Bay Area, and it's overridden by her husband's voice, not in the car, remotely sending her back to Southern California. Imagine trying to explain that to a police officer who's not technically savvy. We've had ladies whose husbands have put hidden cameras and light fixtures in every room in the house, and smoke detectors and vents and fans, even Barbie dolls. Nothing sacred anymore. They can become recording devices. It can be a form of stalking. For women who end up getting killed by their partner, 80% of them have been stalked prior. They can end up looking kind of crazy, but sometimes they start to look paranoid because in fact their every move is being watched. Financial abuse, we talked about that earlier, beating somebody for spending too much or putting them on an allowance, driving them into debt. So let's look at some signs that can keep us safer. Early warning signs. Moving in quickly, sweeping her off her feet, ordering for her in a restaurant, telling her who she can see, how she can spend her time, giving her the silent treatment if she displeases him, blaming her, being sarcastic, putting her down in front of other people, checking in too frequently. In the beginning, it can look like, oh my gosh, he's texting me 50 times a day, he really loves me. Over time, that can start to look like stalking. Very jealous of her. How does he talk about former relationships? His mom, his sister. Is everybody crazy? Is she the only normal, sane, beautiful, wonderful person in his whole life of having met women? What's he like on the road? Does he take his anger and rage out on other people? How controlling is he around money? In public, is he very charming? You can be charming, and you can enjoy being the center of attention, and still be a really good person. No one of these is a definitive measure telling you that you're involved with an abuser. But you just look at the whole list of characteristics and see over time, are these little, the dots that you're seeing, are you beginning to connect them? Does he interrupt her, talk over her a lot? Does he appear to be making all the decisions for both of them? Now look at her. Is she starting, if this is your daughter, a sister, your mother, somebody you're worried about, is she starting to lose, or if it's you, losing her self-confidence, getting more and more isolated, not really coming around anymore, missing work, missing school? Is her performance suffering? If it's a child, or an adult, are they starting to show signs of ADD, ADHD, not concentrating well in school, signs of anxiety, depression, PTSD? Self-medicating with drugs or alcohol. All of these things could be surface issues in themselves, but they could also be reflecting something else that's going on underneath. It's important to rule out domestic abuse. Does she seem like she's afraid of upsetting her husband or her partner? Does she act differently when he's around? Is she starting to say, sorry I did this, sorry I did that, sorry. But she also may be very good at keeping up appearances. Image is very important in our area, and children and women are very good at keeping secrets. Here's what not to say. Don't tell her she should leave. Don't put pressure on her to make a decision before she's ready. If she leaves too soon, she's going to end up going back. Don't judge, don't criticize, don't blame. Don't say, oh, there's two sides to every story. Not when there's abuse involved. She didn't cause it. It's not her fault. She's a crime victim, even if it's an emotional form of abuse. Evan Stark called that coercive control, and it's outlawed in the United Kingdom. Don't tell her to get a restraining order. You could suggest it as an option, but let her work with a domestic violence advocate or someone else, an attorney, to make that decision. Don't say, but he seems so nice. Of course he seems so nice. That's how he gets away with it in public. Here's some things you can say. I am concerned for your safety. I'm concerned for your children's safety. I'm concerned it will only get worse. You don't deserve to be abused. No one deserves to be abused. It is not your fault. You are not alone. I am here to help you. I can find someone who can help. They can call me. Please have them call me. Maria's got brochures and business cards. Please, if you're interested at all, if you're worried about somebody, come see us afterwards and we'll give you our card and contact information. Can I just ask you, with all the different types of abuse I've talked about, how many of you know somebody who has suffered from some form of abuse in their lifetime? Could you just raise your hands? Let's look all around. Can you look at everybody? So whether I'm talking to an audience of 10 or 1,000, almost every single person in the room raises their hand. So let's talk about that after. So no matter who you are, how many people you know, if it's 1 in 3 women, you can bet you've run across more than 2 women, 3 women in your life. You can bet you've run across somebody that's experienced it. So just to leave you with this, if 1 in 3 women experiences domestic violence, chances are you already know somebody. Remember, it's a crime, not a communication issue. It's not going to be solved by couples therapy or counseling. It's a power and control issue, and it often becomes a character issue with this type of person that I'm talking about. It's who they are. Remember that children are the ultimate hidden victims of domestic violence. Let's be concerned for the women involved, the survivors, the adult survivors involved. They deserve to live in peace and safety in their own home. But let's also be concerned for their children, because who speaks for them? Who defends them if their parents cannot? No one deserves abuse. No one causes it. They don't have to suffer in silence. They don't have to do this alone. Everybody deserves to live in peace and safety in their own home. And if you're concerned about somebody, please reach out, break the silence, ask if you can help. You could save a life. Thank you.